Right, let's take a closer look at this story now with our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Good to see you, Doug.
Hi there.
Now, this unfortunately seems to be a familiar operating procedure when it comes to Kenyan elections.
Yeah, and you use the word unfortunately, it's right. All too familiar. Obviously, you know, the tragic episode a decade ago when the entire country was plunged into post-election chaos, a lot of it driven by tribal, ethnic rivalries, sides facing off, over 1,000 people killed, thousands of people more displaced in that violence. That is still very open, festering sore in Kenyans' memories. And when you said standard operating procedure, unfortunately, it's just that because, yes, recent Kenyan history has been marred by a lot of election disputes, not just the tragic episode that I just mentioned from 2007. Other elections have been very, very fraught and tense, and yet recently, right, we've been seeing what a lot of people saw, at least in the nullification by the Supreme Court back in September of the election result. A lot of people saw in that a sign of perhaps Kenya making democratic inroads. It's in the way it carries about elections. And yet here we are back again in the same sort of operating procedure, if you will, or state of electing, marked by fear, marked by anxiety, unfortunately, yes, marked by sporadic violence, as we're hearing the reports coming out today, and very much back to those that very much sort of line in the sand, which a lot of people chalk up to tribal ethnic rivalries. The president of Kenya, in his address, has basically pointed his finger at the opposition leader, saying that he's trying to almost play on those tribal divisions rather than trying to move past them, rather than trying to look forward to a Kenya where every single election isn't necessarily based on what tribe or what ethnicity you belong to, but more on political affiliations, political allegiances, and which candidates' ideas you actually like more and believe in more.
Now, we've seen top electoral officials in Kenya cast doubt over whether this vote rerun can be credible. Can the country hold free and fair elections?
Well, starting out, the first part of your question is a no-brainer to answer. Can this particular vote be credible? The answer to that, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, is no. And the reason it can't be credible is in the sense that you have almost the entire opposition boycotting the election, not voting. You have entire neighborhoods, as we've been hearing in our reports throughout the day, entire neighborhoods where people are not just not voting, but a lot of polling stations haven't even opened, and there are a lot of security concerns in those areas. So no, by definition, you essentially have a one-candidate election here. Yes, there are some, you could almost call them token opposition candidates. Among them, they're not going to get, you know, anything that amounts to peanuts up against Uhuru Kenyatta. So yes, the question obviously is if, as almost absolutely certain, he wins this particular vote today, who's going to accept that? We already have talk among the opposition leader of forming a resistance movement and actually moving towards some sort of almost a permanent civic disobedience of what he sees as a sham government, as an illegitimate government, as a government that has hoisted a coup d'etat on the Kenyan people from the opposition's point of view.
OK, Doug, thank you very much for that. Douglas Herbert, France 24's international affairs commentator there.